Hey, this is Evan Marquette, dating coach for smart, strong, successful women, your personal trainer for love. Welcome back to the Love You podcast, where you can learn everything you need to know about dating, relationships, sex, and men, and find a relationship that makes you feel safe, heard, and understood. We promise so much in this podcast. I do hope we deliver. If you are a regular listener, please go to Spotify, please go to Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe, leave us a positive review. If you're on YouTube, same thing. We really do appreciate your comments. I do read all of them and I appreciate all of them. At the end of the show, I'll tell you more about how you could join the new Love You community and be part of this amazing group of smart, strong, successful women who said no to being alone and persevered and found what they were looking for. You could be one of those women too. Today, I am interviewing one of my favorite clients. I don't like to have favorites. It's bad to say that, but someone who's very, very dear to me. She was in my first Love You class, maybe 2015, 2016. And she's been a dear friend, has worked with me, has established her own coaching practice, has done all sorts of things since we first met at a wedding. The only client wedding I've ever been to is the one that I met her at. Her name is Teresa. Teresa, welcome to the Love You podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, Evan. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today.
Um, you hold a special place in my heart for a number of reasons, which will be apparent as we go through this interview. But the reason I'm doing this on the podcast is so much of my podcast is spent talking about what's wrong in dating, right? All the things that people have to deal with, and it's harder now than it was when we first met 10 years ago, and it's harder than it was when I was met my wife 17 years ago. It's these are real things. And so I want to talk to some of my clients who've had success about their story. I'm doing all the talking right now, but you're going to be doing most of it. I want to talk about your story because someone's going to more identify with you than they are with me, the happily married dating coach. So, Teresa, would you be kind enough to just give us brief biographical information so we can get started? Where do you live? What do you do? Where are you from? Where were you when we first met?
Yeah. So I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. And what I do is I really show women how to improve their mental fitness and develop healthy emotional regulation so that they can finally, fully trust their intuitive gifts with clarity and confidence. And where I was when we first met, I was actually on disability, on permanent disability. And I have a condition, a rare and serious form of migraine that causes stroke-like symptoms. And I was in financial services for over 20 years, most recently working at Merrill Lynch in their private banking and investment group when I developed this condition. And at the time, I was in an incredibly difficult marriage. I had a young son at home. I was commuting over an hour into San Francisco to work. And I now know that difficult marriage was actually a marriage to a covert narcissist. And so for me, my ability and my self-esteem, my ability to discern and my self-esteem were at an all-time low just from being in that incredibly difficult relationship.
And how old were you when A, when you got divorced, B, when we met? I mean, I don't know the gap between those two things.
Yeah, let's see. I was 39 when I got divorced, and I was 43, 44, something like that when I met you. I am definitely one of the statistics that you often talk about. Women over a certain age, over 40, there's a higher percentage of divorce and a higher percentage of you not finding or getting remarried. And yeah, I was one of the ones who, thankfully, that I found you, that I met you, really helped me navigate the online dating world because it was something that was completely foreign to me and I was completely overwhelmed by it.
Well, when you were at that juncture in your life, um, what was, in your opinion, your deepest fear? Like, what were the limiting beliefs that were affecting you at that point in time about dating, relationships, and men?
You know, the biggest thing was my being disabled. I hated that label, and I really struggled with when I would meet guys, what do you do for a living? I don't do anything. I take care of my son. That so many guys would think, oh, you must be a multimillionaire and never have to work again. And I was thinking to myself, well, I did do financial planning, so I've got myself taken care of financially, but it's not like I'm, just some independently wealthy individual. And so it was really a struggle for me to have that confidence. Number one, because of being in that toxic relationship, it took a while for me to develop my self-esteem and recognize that it wasn't me that was the cause in the relationship. It was really the relationship itself that was so unhealthy. But I think between those two things, I was definitely on a healing journey at the time. I left financial services, started studying psychology in graduate school, and that helped a lot. But then once I got to the point where I realized I'm not fine, I'm not meeting anybody in my normal life because I'm not working. I'm not really going out a whole lot. So when I met you at the wedding, I remember that was the first question I asked you: where are all the good guys at? As if they're on some ranch in Montana where you could go, pick your favorite steed. And that really began our conversation. And I feel so incredibly blessed to have met you at that point in time, so that I could meet my husband and have such an amazing life.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk a lot about that relationship and your journey, but for me, there's three phases. There's the before, and then there's the search, and then there's the relationship itself. And
Mhm.
so I I I guess I want to know, were you dating when I met you? Were you in the process of dating online, or were you still sort of sitting on the sidelines, insecure about your condition and what that meant and how you had to bring it up? Like, where were you active, or were you sidelined at that point?
I think at that point in time, my neighbor, who had also gotten divorced, she had started online dating and had met a couple of guys. So she was definitely encouraging me to do online dating. I would get online, I'd get completely overwhelmed,
Sure, of
and then
course.
I'd get off. And then I'd go through a dry spell. I've got to find him somewhere. Get online, get overwhelmed. It became like a full-time job. And then I just forget about it. I'm just not going to do it. And she was actually encouraging me to get on, oh gosh, what was the app? It was, oh shoot, what was the app at, Evan, where it used to be kind of like thought of as the sex app where you just for connections?
Tinder?
Tinder. She was telling me to get on Tinder, and I was like, I am not looking just for a fun time. So, there were guys that I would meet in real life. They weren't really high quality guys.
Mm.
That's where I was at this crossroad. I was like, I am ready now for a real relationship. I've healed myself to a certain extent, but I don't know what to do. I don't know how to navigate this world. And I think it's gotten even harder, like you said at the beginning, to really navigate this online world. And I think this is why it's so important to have a trusted dating coach like you, because it is something that requires guidance. It's not something that you can do on your own and be able to sustain it, or at least not from what I've seen from, in different relationships.
Well, again, thank you. And again, this is not, I appreciate the plug. This is not even intended to be a plug so much as to be a window into one individual woman's story. Um,
Absolutely.
uh,
But you know what? You got to, I've got to tell the truth, Evan. It really is the fact as I see it. So it wasn't a shameless plug.
I'll take it.
Take it, Evan, take it.
I just don't want anybody to think that I got you here and said, okay, make sure that 15 minutes in, you plug the view.
Full disclosure,
There was no preparation
no
prior to the.
preparation. This is a
Okay.
conversation between two individuals, a dating coach and his former client.
So, you're in the first cohort of Love You. I mean, I just released it. I've got the award that you all made for me behind me, which made me really happy. It's not a real award. It was my clients making me a Best Dating Coach award, which does not actually exist. But it's a really special group where we had about 300 people at times pre-Zoom. So we had 300 people going through the course at the exact same time. And about 50 of them stuck around for all 26 weeks and had a real vibe. And we got really, really close over that time because it was, 26 hours over 26 weeks and the private forum and whatnot. And so from that time, because we're going to talk about the retreat and your relationship afterward, but from that time that you're in the course, what are the things that you remember most content-wise? What are the things that have stuck with you that impacted your view of dating relationships for men?
I think, and I can't remember. I'm pretty sure you did, or someone did a book of Evanisms after the retreat. But the thing that I remember the most is, I come from a spiritual background. I'm very spiritual in my life. I also have this analytical logic side. So it's really this blend of logic and intuition. And I remember saying to you or saying in the group, I just keep attracting the wrong guys. I just don't know what's going on. I'm attracting the wrong guys. And you immediately came back with, you're not attracting the wrong guys. You are choosing the wrong guys. And I think that for me, I mean, I'm getting chills. It was such an empowered realization and powerful realization that I'm not a victim to my dating life. I'm actually making choices that are impacting my potential of choosing men that are appropriate fits for me. And so that was one of my favorite and still is one of my favorite Evanisms. And then just also understanding your analogy of the shoe store and recognizing, how to view online dating is really about trying on different things, seeing how different things work. And I don't remember if I got this from you or if it was something that I've ascertained since then. But I was, in fact, telling one of my girlfriends who's going through or preparing to go through a dating process again. And I said, you know what? It's not about the guy. Stop focusing on the guy. Start focusing on the relationship. What kind of relationship do you want? So when you're doing your visioning for 2025, stop focusing on, oh, I want a guy who has this and this and this. Start focusing on what you want, those values you want in a relationship, because that is when it's going to get you where you want to be.
Well, that's really well said, and I want to bring it back to your intuitive. And I know it's hard to not talk about your business, compartmentalizing here, but one of the things that I've learned from years of coaching, from working with women, and this was an epiphany for me, was how often they would ignore their own feelings, right? To maintain a relationship that wasn't serving them.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, I don't know if we could call that intuition, but more and more as a coach, I've been talking about feelings, right? Rather than just the logical portion of it is I could logic you to death with, he's got this, he's got this, he's got this, he's got all the checklist. Here are the things he does right. Sometimes he's really so amazing. Well, how do you feel? I feel anxious. I feel unseen. I feel insecure. I feel like I can't even speak my mind because he might leave. I feel like if I set a boundary, he's gonna get angry with me, right? And we sweep all that stuff under the rug and then wonder why our relationships don't improve. So it's not just choosing the wrong guy, it's choosing him every single day. It's accepting the fact that this is your definition of a relationship is one in which you are constantly on edge. And so just listening to that, does that tie into some of your intuitive thing? Because again, I don't know enough about it to speak to it.
I think that it definitely does. And I think where it kind of ties in is so many women do look to their feelings, but because a lot of those feelings, like anxiety, like worrying that they might lose the guy, those are all fear-based emotions. And
Mm,
so you can't trust your intuition when you're in a fear-based state. And so
mhm,
that's why it's so important to be able to learn how to shift your state, learn how to develop that mental fitness, that healthy emotional regulation,
mhm,
so that you can clearly access your gifts. And I think that's what your program, and I know this isn't about your program, but truly it's what your program and your advice is, that you show women how to do that. You show women how they can start learning how to trust themselves by recognizing the patterns that they're experiencing. And so I'm so happy that you have, included more of those feelings and emotions in your work, because I think that's where the real power lies. And as you know, you strongly advised me not to to continue a relationship with my now current husband. But it was because I was in that healthy state of emotional regulation and I was able to access my intuition and trust it, that I have by far the best relationship in my entire life. And I met him when I was 44 or 45. So
I was going to bring that up as a punchline later. I knew
I ruined your
I knew
punchline.
you'd bring it up before I did because it's not often that I get to publicly admit that I was wrong, and I kind of like doing that. I think it's a sign of humility. But I want to before I give over the punchline, I wanted to get to the story. So we'll hold on to that. But I indeed advised Teresa to break up with the man who's currently her husband. So we'll circle back to that later. Um, from the time that either you started working with me or you started dating a different way, how long did it take for you to find your partner? I mean, how many dates, how many months, how many years?
I started Love You. So your Love You program was in 2015. And I think within 3 months, I met a guy who I dated for 9 months. Was kind of a interesting, not great relation, great in a lot of ways, but not long-term great. I think he was a good guy for me to have my last hurrah of fun with, because he was a very fun guy to date. And then he broke up with me. He was talk about my own personal problems. I had severe abandonment issues. And
Mhm.
so I had always broken up with the guy. Always. My entire life I had left my marriage, broken up with guys. He was the first guy, this guy that I dated in Love You, who broke up with me. And it
Mhm.
was devastating for me. I
Gotcha.
remember crying nonstop for like 3 days. And I, even in the midst of crying, I remember saying, it's not about him. I was going to break up with him, like at the end of the week. So it wasn't about him. But clearly, there were some emotions that I had to process that enabled me to 2 weeks later get back on the horse, get back online, which is what you advise us to do. And I ended up meeting my husband. And now the turn of that is
How many dates, how many months later after that breakup?
2 weeks later.
Now,
And
I just want to frame that. That's astonishing for people
because of
who
your advice,
not taking any credit for. I'm really not taking any credit for it. You're the one who actually picked yourself up after. So you met him online after 3 months of rigorous online dating, 9 month relationship ended. 2 weeks later, you're back online, and in
I think,
walks.
well, actually, I think I was back online a week later. So I cried my heart out for 3 days,
Mhm.
went and got a massage on the massage table, was crying my eyes out the entire time. It was ridiculous. And then after the tears stopped, I said, you know what? Gave myself a few days to gather myself together, figure out what I'm looking for, what went wrong, what went right, and set a new course. Got back online within a week. I was actively in my funnel, actively dating probably 3 guys, and then by the time I met my husband in the second week, I was up to 5 guys that I was kind of moving through, doing lunch and dinner dates and what have
Sure.
you. And then met my husband. And I think within 4 weeks, he asked me to be his girlfriend.
That's
And
what they do.
yep. And then it just went from there.
So, instead of you fast forwarding, I want to enjoy the dating phase. I know you ended up married, so it would be easy to talk about the marriage, but I want to save that a little bit
Okay.
because for most people, the dating phase is where everything goes wrong, right? You meet a guy, you like a guy. Now there's this whole set of insecurities, a whole bunch of things that could happen. The whole third month of dating is about these machinations. So, what was your first date like? Did you screen him? Did you go out on a blind date with him? Was it quick coffee or was it a date that lasted until 1 in the morning? What was your early phase courtship like?
With right when I started Love You, or with my
No,
husband?
with the man you married.
So my first date, let's see, moved them through your process, your 222 process. and emailed back and forth online or messaged back and forth online, moved him to email, and he quickly asked for my phone number.
Sure.
And we had 2 phone conversations. In the second phone conversation, he said, let's get together for lunch. We met for lunch. He came to my area and met him. I remember walking up. So what you don't know about me, or Evan, you know this about me, but what listeners don't know about me, I'm 6 feet tall and I'm a former athlete. So, when I put on my dating applications, hey, I am 6 feet tall, barefoot guys, like you need to be at least 6 foot tall. Like I know there are a lot of women out there who want a tall guy, right? For me, it was like vitally important that I have that. And because of the process of the different dating apps I had tried, and because of my neighbor's encouragement to get on Tinder, I actually went on Tinder. And on Tinder, I don't know if it's changed, but 9 years ago or what have you, you can't put a lot of information. So I think I put on there, I think that was probably the only thing I put, or like of the 3 things I could put, hey, I'm 6 foot tall, barefoot guy, right? And so when he reached out to me, he didn't have his height on there. And
Mhm.
I thought to myself, oh, for the love of God. Evans always said, don't be concerned about, height, be concerned about the guy. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to trust this guy. Sounds great. We really seem to vibe. And when I walked up to the restaurant, here is this former football player, shoulders out to here, 6'4", handsome, just like his pictures. And he gave me the biggest smile. And I thought, oh, this is going to be a good date. And we had a great conversation over lunch. He was laughing at me because there was a woman in the line. It was like Yala Mediterranean, it's kind of like fast food type thing. There was a woman in line who was complimenting me, telling me what beautiful eyes I have, and oh my God, I love your hair. Where you get your hair done. And George was saying, after she had walked away, he goes, I think that girl was hitting on you. And I'm like, no, dude, this is what girls do. Girls like compliment one another. And he's like, no, she was totally hitting on you. I've got competition. So it just ended up being a really fun date for us. And I was never one of those girls who kissed on the first date. Once again, you kind of withdrew your advice and guidance. I thought, well, I'll see how it goes. And he ended up giving me, it was interesting, when he walked me to my car, he ended up giving me 3 quick pecks on the lip. And I just remember thinking to myself, it's something that you would give to your husband, or your husband would give to you, like when you walk out the door. It was one of those types of kisses. That's very much how it felt to me. And so I was really kind of taken aback by, number one, why didn't this guy like either go for the full kiss or just not kiss? But then also there was that underlying sense of familiarity. There was this feeling already between us. We had developed through conversations and obviously over lunch meeting a connection that felt very real. And I just remember, driving away from that, thinking to myself, it was really odd that it felt like kisses that a husband would give me, so that's how
Yeah.
our first date went.
I like that. And thank you for the level of detail. I think that really brings people there. There's so many different paths to the same place. And so that's why I like to get into the weeds and talk about how it felt. How was he different from other guys you dated at that point, at that juncture, not knowing the man he would be, the husband he would be, but
Yeah.
at that point, what struck you about him that put him in the lead?
Interesting way you put that too, because that's truly how I felt as he was in the lead of these 5 guys that I was dating.
Well, because you're the CEO and he was the intern.
Yeah, absolutely. At the time, there was one guy in my funnel who was a guy who had been sober. He was like sober, I don't know, 7 years or something like that, but he had had alcohol issues. I really liked him because he had horses. I'm a long-term competitive equestrian, and but he was a little shorter than me. He was like 5'11". There was another guy who was a former soccer player. So he was, great physique. He was a salesman, so he had the charm and whatnot, intelligent guy. But he too was like 6 foot. And let's see, there was a couple other guys. There was one guy who uh, had very, very different political views than me, and I'm pretty open politically. I can have conversations and friends with anyone, but he had some very, hard line,
Sure.
and I wasn't sure quite how to take that. And I can't even remember what the fourth guy was, but George, the thing I liked about him was, well, number one, he's in sales, so he's very an excellent communicator, which is incredibly important to me. And he also has really high emotional intelligence. He doesn't look at people as things. He looks at as people as individuals, and how can I get to know them? Like you said, you can learn from everyone. He has that kind of approach. And I think what really struck me about it was him being a former athlete. He had really done well. He does well in his career. He was smart. He's funny. He asks a lot of great questions, whereas a lot of other guys, I might have to carry the conversation. I'm an introvert. George is an extrovert. I don't like having to carry the conversation. So I think there were a lot of qualities that were right for me. I'm also a very strong woman. And so I can easily run over other guys.
Mhm.
And he held his own, which, that shift that I talked about, rather than looking for the guy, but rather looking for the relationship qualities. Once I started looking at things through that lens, I think that's what brought so much clarity and clearly made him the front runner until date two.
We'll get there. So, you bring up something that's interesting, and I don't. A lot of people think they're unicorns. Most people are unique individuals, but there's overlap between their personalities or their circumstances. So, love you. We got a lot of smart, strong, successful women. I think you have a pretty unique blend of masculine and feminine, and being with a guy like George allows you to be more in your feminine. And I think that's where you really shine. I think for women listening, that's what everybody's longing for,
Yeah,
right? Is a guy that I could just trust to be my equal, because otherwise I will overpower him and not respect him, not because I'm trying to, just my natural force of nature. It feels like that allows you to be a better version of you.
absolutely. And I think that is the key. It's something that I definitely focused on in my healing journey is balancing that masculine and feminine energy that we all have. We all have masculine and feminine energy within ourselves, but recognizing what I needed in a relationship. I needed a man who could step up and balance me, who could play off of, where maybe I'm strong, he may not be as strong, and vice versa. But like you said, more importantly, I needed a man that I felt safe with, that I felt like could protect me. Not that I can't protect myself, but I didn't want to have that role. In a lot of my relationships prior to him, I was the breadwinner. I was the one who was the take charge of all the household stuff and working the career. That old 80s commercial, bringing home the
Sure.
bacon, frying it up in the pan. That was me.
Mhm.
And I was raised to be that way by
Yeah.
a family of women where all the men died off. We had to do it.
Right.
So, in choosing the relationship, it really was about who can balance that? Who can I respect? Who can I trust? Who will be there to who could match me on so many different levels, and
Right.
that's where he was.
Okay. So now let's get to the twist in our story. Because when you were dating at the very beginning of dating him, he revealed some information to you, which you later revealed to me on our first Love You retreat,
Mm-hmm.
which for just about anybody in the world would have been a deal breaker, except for your intuition, which proved to be correct.
Yeah.
Would you be kind enough to share what George told you? Uh,
Yeah, it was actually kind of a funny story. So our first date was at Yala, which like I said is it's not a fast food, although I called it that way, but you know, you go in, you order, and then you sit down at a table and eat. He asked me out for the second date. So he called me. It was a Friday when we had that lunch date. I think he called me. He had to go. He's in a dermatology sales. So he had to go see a couple of his doctor's offices. He called me like 2 hours later and asked me out for the next day because we both had a kid-free weekend. And he said, let's meet up, you know, downtown and, you know, and we'll just kind of see how things go. You know, we'll go have dinner, we'll have drinks or what have you. I show up and the man forgot his wallet. And I thought to myself, okay. And he said to me, you know what? I can go home. He lived like 20 minutes away. I can go home and get my wallet and come back. And, you know, we can go have dinner and drinks and have a wonderful time. Or, you know, or I could just stay and we could, you know, you could either pay or we could, you know, figure something out. And I said, you know what? Thanks to your Love You program. I said, you know what? Don't worry about going and getting your wallet. Why don't we just hang out together? We'll go someplace, we'll walk around, we'll talk, you know, I'll buy us a couple teas and, you know, or we'll stop in and get some dessert, you know, like we'll make it work. You know, this could be a free date. And I
Yeah.
gave him a pass. I gave him a pass. And he later revealed to me that like, if I would have sent him home, he wouldn't have gone out with me again. The fact that I had so much empathy and was so kind in giving him that grace was
Mhm.
really what made him perk up and go, wow, this like, I have to, you know, find out more about this woman. So
That,
we,
but by the way, that happened to me once. You know, I famously went on 300 dates. I once went on a date in Santa Monica. I remember the restaurant. It was upscale Asian restaurant. Forgot my wallet, and she was not having it. It was the end of the night, so she had to pick up. We like I discovered at the end of the meal, so she had to
yeah,
pick up the check, but there was no second date.
yeah. Yeah, it's something that a lot of women, I think, especially in this online world where you don't necessarily know the guys. I mean, that's a whole different topic. So anyway, so we go into this restaurant, and it was a restaurant where you had to be a paying customer in order to like sit at a table, and they had just put out tables on their balcony. And we kind of, you know, he's like, come on, let's just go in, you know, they won't even notice us. So we walked in, just sat down at a table. We didn't even have any drinks. So as we're sitting there talking, he said, you know what, I've got to tell you something. And he goes, you know, I don't know how you're going to take it, but I feel it's really important for you to know. And I said, okay. And I'm thinking to myself, what's going on? And in my head, because I'm intuitive, in my head, I'm thinking, she is your karma. And I heard that 3 times. She is your karma. She is your karma. She is your karma. And I thought to myself, holy F, what the heck's going on? He's on his phone, scrolling through his phone as, you know, after he told me, you know, I've got something I need to share. And he pulls up a picture and he shows me a picture of a sonogram. And he said, I'm having a baby. And I thought to myself, okay, Teresa, how are you going to handle this news? And I quickly thought to myself, you know what, Teresa? Two things are going to happen. Either nothing's going to go on with this guy. And so it's not going to matter. You know, that I think she was only 3 months along at that point in time. So either it's not going to matter because nothing's going to happen, or this is the man for you. And if he's the man for you, you're going to figure it out. You're going to make it work.
So let's just pause and make it very explicit. Teresa's on a second date with a guy she's pretty excited about.
My
Who
front runner.
it was a one night stand. It was just like, or just somebody dated briefly for like less than a month.
It was someone he had dated off and on for 2 years. So he had dated for six
Got it.
months. They
Okay.
broke up for 6 months. They got back together for 8 months. They or for 7 months. They broke up for 2 months.
Got it. So it was a relationship, a rocky relationship, but it was a relationship and very clearly an accident. And she decided we're keeping the baby.
Uh, I knew, and we later found out with certainty that she had intentionally gotten pregnant. She, at the time, I didn't. At the time, it was only my intuitive notion that
Yeah.
gave me that. But she has 2 kids from 2 different guys. and
Hmm.
never married, never engaged, anything. She tried to get her first guy to marry her. He wasn't having it. Same thing with George. Each time she was the one who was trying to get George back, got him back. They had gotten back together. 2 months later, she told him she was pregnant, and he was ready to break up with her for good before she
Wow.
told him. So
So, um, it's at that point that you come to me with this, and again, I'm owning it because, I'm pretty consistent. I said, Teresa, I'm sure you've got a really wonderful connection. I promise you, you could find another great, smart, funny, successful, strong, tall man who's not having a baby with another woman. And you process it. You didn't react. You weren't like, how dare you? You took it
I took it in. Yep.
and you made your own choice. So tell me about the next phase, about how you get over this, because it seems like it just turned into it wasn't a big deal, but it was just another thing in his life, and your relationship functions like everybody else's relationship.
Yeah, I think on the retreat when I had that discussion with you, I remember rooming with Julie and us talking, she and I talking late into the night about, oh my God, like so many people are telling me don't do this, but my intuition is telling me he could be the one.
Yeah.
And I kept coming back to the point that I had on that second date. If this isn't going to go anywhere, then I don't need to worry about it. I don't need to worry about anything. But if it is going to go somewhere, this is the type of guy that has the skills. And I know I have the skills to navigate this situation. And so for me, it really was about trusting myself, trusting my own abilities, trusting what I was learning about him as far as how he navigates relationships, how I navigate relationships, and just holding everything ever so lightly. It was never, I remember even when after the retreat and I had made the decision, no, I'm going to, see where this goes. And she ended up, it was probably about, well, it was a couple months later after the retreat where she had the baby. And I
Hmm.
remember talking to you on one of the calls and saying, I was so anxious. I mean, imagine being with a man who you are now in love with, and he is having a baby with another woman. And this other woman is nasty. She is,
Probably some piece of work.
yes, she is definitely a piece of work. And she was doing everything that she could do to try to get him back, so far as to call his mother and to try to convince his mother to tell him to break up with me and to get back together with her. I mean, she went to those lengths. And the mother was inviting her to all the events because of course, she was having her grandchild. So not only did I have to navigate, knowing that, but she was at all the family functions. She was at all these events. So it was incredibly challenging for anyone. But for me, what really helped me get through that process was, and I think is what has made our relationship so incredibly strong, is that he kept stepping up. He kept proving to me that he wanted to be in a relationship with me and that he was willing to do anything it took to make sure that I knew that I was his number one priority. And so between my intuitive guidance of trusting the process, trusting what I knew about him, trusting
Sure.
what I intuited about her, I was able to navigate an incredibly complex challenge.
So, fast forward, you forged this relationship. How long are you together before you marry?
We just about 2 years. So
Okay.
he proposed to me a little over a year. We actually moved in kind of quickly, I think within seven months, which
Okay.
once again, it was my intuition driving us and his intuition. He has intuition as well. And then within a year, we got engaged. And then a year later, we got married.
Okay. So let's flip this around because we've heard about a remarkable woman and a remarkable man and a remarkable and unique story. How is he different than the guy that you pictured in your head? What did you give up that you thought you were going to have in your original laundry list?
You know what's really interesting, Evan, is that once I made that shift to focus on the relationship, I gave up. Yeah, I mean, I used to have lists. I
Sure.
want him to be tall. I want him to be good in bed. I want him to, just right down the line. Once I gave that up and started focusing on the relationship, I thought, I believed that I was going to have to give up what I wanted on that list.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up getting everything that I wanted on that list and
Mm-hmm.
more, things that I didn't even think to ask for.
Yeah.
And I think that's the real powerful shift for me, and why this is so profound and why I have so much respect for the work you do, is because when you start to focus on the right things, everything else takes care of itself. So, are there things that I wish were different? Heck yeah. I wish he wouldn't have gotten back together with her that one last time. And I mean, although I love our daughter, there's a part of me that would be like, my life would be so much easier if we just didn't even have to worry about her. But we've been able to navigate it, and we've been able to create boundaries and create a relationship where baby girl is thriving, and we're happy, and we have a very fulfilling relationship. So for me, I didn't have to give up anything. Like I said, it when you shift your focus to your shift your perspective to what's really important, everything else takes care of itself.
Okay. That's pretty powerful. And I don't want to argue with your message because it's the best message. It's the one that everybody wants to hear. You don't have to give up anything and you can get everything, right? And the implication, my concern about that is the implication that there's no trade-offs, right? Um, so let's just say there's one thing, and you landed on it, was if I had my druthers, I would not choose a man who was having a baby with another child, with another woman, right? And by allowing that in and not making him wrong or overreacting to that situation, right, I got more than I could have imagined from my partnership. Um, did he have to give up on anything to be in partnership with you?
We've actually talked about this a lot, and I will go back and I will edit my last answer that I gave, because one of the things that and I know he wouldn't mind me sharing this, he grew up in kind of an abusive household, and he's, like I said, former athlete, former football player. He was never raised in a household with affection. For me, affection is incredibly important. It is something that I have had in every single relationship up to him. I remember when in our early dating, he couldn't even cuddle for very long. Like,
Mm.
and we came up with a phrase for him to use when he had like reached his max, and he would say, "Okay, my turkey poppers popped." Like those butterball turkeys. He would say, "Okay, I'm popped. My poppers popped." And I would know to back off. But I was constantly trying to push those boundaries because I was used to a lot of affection.
Mhm.
And so for me, I remember telling him this before, shortly, well, actually it was shortly after we became boyfriend and girlfriend, is I said to him, "You know what, you have met the bare minimum in all the different categories for a relationship. And as long as you can continue to grow the affection portion, we're going to be okay." But I also, from your advice, had to accept him for who he was at that point in time. And I remember asking myself regularly, is this good enough? Is this enough affection? If this is all the affection that I'm going to get for the rest of my life, is this good enough? And even before he proposed to me, we were living together. I had gone to a friend's wedding down in Cabo. And I remember talking to her dad, who I was, he was like a second father to me. And I remember asking him, this is like 2 months before he proposed to me. 2 months before he proposed to me, I'm talking to my, friend's dad. Does affection ever like grow more? Like, is it possible for guys to like become more affectionate over time? And I remember he even said to me, he's like, Teresa, this guy is 45 years old. He's not going to change, so you either accept it or not. So yeah, there was something that I felt like I had to give up, but here's the key: because he loves me so much, because I have created a relationship that is so safe for him to be able to be vulnerable, to stretch his comfort zone, I'm actually getting, is it the amount of affection that I would have had in other relationships? Not by a landslide. However, it is so much more than what he was able to give me 9 years ago. And
Mm-hmm.
now he actually invites me into cuddle, and I'm the one who pulls away. And
Mm-hmm.
he's the one throughout the day that is offering me hugs and giving me incredible, he's not a big kisser either, which, I love to kiss. That's what I've always had. He's the one who is making sure that he gives me really good kisses, but he is constantly striving and pushing those boundaries within himself. And I think that just shows his own self-awareness and his love for me, and recognizing that this is really important to me.
I love the way you told that story. And yeah, I mean, that's one of the five love languages, and you asked yourself the right question. If nothing changed, could I be content in this relationship? You made
Mhm.
peace with that, and by making peace with that, you actually ended up getting more than you expected at the beginning. And again, I think there's great wisdom in that. Um, what would you say to younger Teresa about how to how to make good decisions in love, right? 25-year-old Teresa.
Wow. 25-year-old Teresa was still concerned about what her mother thought, and thought her mother was the one person who could guide her on how to have a good relationship after having, I mean, it was typical when you're younger, you go through relationships. Nothing's really permanent when you're younger, or at least,
Right.
hopefully it's not. You're still learning about yourself. I gave my power away. I trusted what my mother told me to do with my ex-husband. He was a Stanford graduate. He had dual degrees, masters as well as undergrad. He was a professional. He was
Yeah.
the only child of an incredibly wealthy family. In my mom's opinion, who was a Depression era baby, in her
Yeah.
opinion, this is the man that my daughter should be with, because he's always going to be able to take care of you, provide for you financially. Younger Teresa, if I could go back and speak to that 25-year-old, I would have said, trust yourself. Trust you. Only you know what is right for you. Take advice by all means. If there are people you trust who can provide you valuable insight,
Hmm.
take in that information, but filter it through your own intuitive guidance, filter it through your own experiences and what you want out of life. Not what someone else wants, not what you think you want, not what would make you look great in your friend group, having the most handsome guy or the guy driving the BMW. None of that matters. What matters is the relationship that you're going to have with your significant other. And my mother's dead. She doesn't have any say. It's one of these things where people are going to fall out of your life. You're going to stop hanging out with friends. You're going to change jobs, but you're always going to be with yourself. So make sure that whatever choice you make, it is in alignment with what is important to you, what you value in a relationship. And so I think that would be the one, if I could only give one piece of advice, that's what it would be.
Now, that's the advice to younger you.
Mhm.
If you were to take the sum total of your life experience, and again, it's very hard to reduce this. I've done interviews and podcasts and things like this for a long time. So how do you take a lifetime of wisdom and what's the one thing? But what would you tell a woman who's listening to this podcast right now?
I would say you're not getting any younger. You're not getting any younger. And it is, if you have in your heart that you are meant to have an amazing relationship, if that is in your heart, then trust that that is possible for you in your life. And it's not about getting anything, it's about removing the barriers that are getting in the way of that becoming a reality.
Mhm.
And I think that a lot of people misconstrue that into this kind of pop spiritual, psychology type stuff of, oh, my soulmate or my twin flame or my, I'm meant for someone or the perfect guy will find me. So many
Yeah.
women will say that, as if, the FedEx guy is going to show up at your door and propose to you. It really is about doing that inner work, but you're not getting any younger. So it's not about doing the inner work and then doing something. It's about getting out there, getting online, being in the trenches, fishing, whatever analogy you want to use, while you're doing that inner work. And recognizing that when you're in relationship, whether it's a month long, 6 month, year, 5 year relationship or longer, you are constantly working on yourself. So you're not getting any younger. Put yourself out there and trust the process. Trust yourself. Do the work on yourself. And you're going to be, as you're going through relationships, what I think a lot of people don't realize is I think there's this perception, and you would know better than me since this is your business, but I feel like there's this perception of choosing a guy and you being you and not recognizing how much you change in relationships. And instead, a lot of women go out there and think, I'm me. I haven't really changed. They don't realize how they've changed. And so they just keep plugging in a different guy who's the same guy, same type of
Hmm.
guy. He looks
Yeah.
different. He may have a different job, but he's basically the same guy. And so instead, shift your perspective to understand that when you're in a relationship, what is happening is actually being reflected back to you and is an opportunity for you to examine and to heal. And if you are courageous enough to take that step, have that awareness and heal, then you can actually grow in every single relationship you have. And through that process, you can start whittling down what kind of relationship you really truly desire. So shifting that focus from the guy and shifting it to the relationship, and then taking feedback from all your previous relationships and then forming that idea or of the relationship you want. And that is what's going to get you to your goal.
Okay. Powerful stuff. Teresa, thank you so much for being on the Love You podcast. Thank you for being a stand for other women and an inspiration and telling your unique and yet somewhat universal story about how you got out of your own way and removed some of those barriers and let the right person in. And you trusted me with your love life and you took the advice that you needed and you discarded the advice that you didn't need, which is also part of the process. And you really do have a wonderful life and a wonderful marriage. And so I'm really proud of you. Thank you for being here. Um, my name is Evan Mark Katz. This is the Love You podcast. If you enjoyed today's podcast, leave us a comment or a review, subscribe wherever you subscribe. And on a more personal note, if you were listening to Teresa's words and you want them to be yours, right? She's someone who reinvented her life in her 40s. We've got clients in their 50s, 60s, 70s. It is it is never too late. I'm not gonna play the age card. Right? But there's never a better time than right now if you want to make that change. So if you're not on my mailing list, go to evanmarkkatz.com/quiz, put in your name and email address, take my quiz to discover how you've been wasting time on the wrong men. And if you're ready for coaching, you're ready to take that big step and make that commitment, go to evanmarkatz.com/now. Book a time with me. We'll talk, and perhaps we could show you a path to lasting love. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening. I love you. I appreciate you. And I will see you here next week.